Hi friends, welcome to my channel, and today I have a video that is a little bit different for me. Today I'm going to be talking about books, and also a video that I've really been wanting to film but wasn't quite sure if it fit on this channel or not. So I'm going to try it out today, and if y'all like it, want to see more videos, or you have a very specific book video you'd like to see from me, leave them in the comments below. I would like this to be a recurring series, maybe not every month, maybe every other month, but I'm not promising anything at this time, because if this is not something you'd want to see, then I won't bring it on this channel and it will be on the second channel. I do have one other book video on that channel. That one was for fall reading. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll let you know at some point where you can find more book videos from me. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you all about how reading is just giving me so much contentment, and really how reading has affected my contentment. So the video is going to break down like this. The first part, I'm going to talk about reading as contentment and how that happened. Then I'm going to be talking about the worst reads of the year so far, like what I have not liked and why. And then I'm going to talk about my favorite reads. The last part, so I guess part 4, is if we have time, I'll share what I'm looking to read next, like what's on the spring, TBR, if you will. So to jump into the video and to, really get into how or why reading is bringing contentment, I feel like you need just like a small backstory. I've been in school since 2012, and I really don't think my experience is all that unique. I stopped reading through most of university. I went right from undergrad to my master's to my PhD, and it has just been school straight. And also, by the way, I have taken summer school for every year except for my 4th year. And then when you get into grad school, you don't have summers off. So I have literally been in school since 2012. There has been no breaks. And I stopped reading during that time. I used to love reading when I was young. I remember when I was in elementary school, I would read 100 books in the summer, and that was always a goal. And I would read 10, 12 books a week. Like, I loved reading. And I really lost that in university because reading, I read for school. I was reading so much every day, even in the summer, for school. And that sucked all of the fun, pleasure, and enjoyment out of reading for me. So in 2019, I said to myself, listen, Shauna, I know you used to love reading, so I want to figure out and bring back the joy of reading for you as an adult. I don't know why I said that like I had an actual conversation with somebody else that wasn't me. But in essence, what I decided was that I wanted to get back into reading. And also, 2019... I would have been, 25? Yeah, I was 25. I have not read as an adult, and I had no idea what I wanted to read, what I even liked. I truly had no idea. And also, what books were even on the market? Like, what books did adult people read? So 2019 was the best reading year I have ever had. I set a goal for 20 books and I hit 21 books. And that was such a good reading year for me, in part because I was doing a lot of experimenting with reading, and I read pretty widely. And then when I found something that I liked, I would read similar books. And I have found my favorite book ever, up until now, The Bone Season. And I also found other books that I really, really loved. Some books I really love from 2019, Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, NG, is that how you say it, Ng? And then also The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. 2 of my favorite books of the year behind The Bone Season. Also Becoming by Michelle Obama. I was in a book club in 2019, and they had some really, really great picks. But I also found books that I didn't like, and I didn't realize this pattern until I heard it from Anne Bogle from What You Should Read Next, or What Should I Read Next, the podcast. And she called them a gentle apocalypse. Books like Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, Severance by Ling Ma, as well as An Ocean of Minutes by Thea Lim. I do not like those books. I do not like the slow apocalypse books. If it's an apocalypse, give me an apocalypse. 2020 was a full year of comprehensive exams. I had a book list of 200 books I had to read in a year for school, and then the pomegranate hit, and Then I moved out in 2021. Those two were horrible years, I think, for everybody. I did very little reading. 2020, I read 6 books. And so at the end of 2020, I was really trying to get myself to read. I was like, Shauna, you should be reading. And I kind of tried some books at the end of the year. That was kind of how it went. So in 2022, when I started this project, when I started the year of contentment, the goal was a little bit different in 2022, because in 2021, when I, look back, I realized that the last part of the year, I was trying to get myself to read because I felt like I should. And I think this can be really common when it comes to reading, but other hobbies, things that you should do, or things that you used to like doing that maybe you fell out of favor of. And so like, I should play the piano, or I should do calligraphy, or I should play hockey, or whatever it is. And so I felt like I should be reading. Whereas in 2022, I really had the goal of finding the joy of reading. I do feel like I'm a bit of a different person now than I was 3 years ago. In 2019, I was open to reading everything or anything and trying it out. Whereas in 2022, what I really realized, protecting my inner peace mattered most. So I was mostly looking for lighthearted books. And there was just like certain topics that I wouldn't go into because I just don't have I would say maybe like the emotional or mental capacity to deal with them right now. There's just certain topics I know that I will not do well with at the moment. So lighthearted books were on the top of the list. And what I noticed when I really tried to find the joy of reading, initially I was really frustrated because I felt like I wasn't finding the books for me, the things that I really loved or would love. And I picked things that I thought that I would, but they just I felt like nothing was working. And eventually after a couple of months, I was able to write a list of things that just weren't working. One, slow books. If you can't jump into the content within the first 50 pages, I don't have time for it. And that is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit scared of reading bigger books, is because if you have 500 pages to play with, you can take 100 pages to ease in. And I'm not about that. So if it's a slow book, don't really like it. I also don't really like slice of life books where nothing really happens. So books that are slow, don't like slice of life. I do not like character-driven books. I like plot-driven books, and also books that feature male characters. I'll talk about that when I talk about one of the books I didn't like. I felt like I was just reading the wrong things at the beginning of the year in an effort to read widely and also try and figure out who else I might like. But this was ultimately, I think, an approach that doesn't work. And when I found what worked for me is when I went back to 2019 and I said, what books did I love here and why? And also, which books did I not love here and why? And once I did that, I found books within a week, multiple books. So what I like are slow burning romances, and I was trying my best to not get into romances, but what I found from 2019 is that some of the books I enjoyed the most, or I would say that were emotionally satisfying, were some romance books. I also really love escapism, any kind of book and any kind of genre that makes me leave modern life. And then also I love world building. I love entering new worlds and also seeing the creativity of an author build a new world from scratch, build a magic system. That takes so much creativity. Or maybe not necessarily just building a magic system, but if we're talking about the, apocalyptic kind of books, you're building a world after. You're building new class and social structures. And that takes a lot of creativity and imagination. And really, for me, what brought contentment was getting away from books I should read, or doing vague browsing, or seeing what was new and popular. What I found is that with the contentment framing in mind, I did lose a bit of the idea of finding the joy of reading. Like, that did get lost between now in January, or January and now. When I picked that idea back up again and I said, Shauna, reading should make you happy and reading should be fulfilling. So what makes you feel that way? And once you figure that out, then reading will bring contentment. And what I like the most about reading, and what I've found with some of these favorite books of mine, which I will talk about once I get through the 5 books I didn't like, what I really like about reading is the emotions that books can bring out in you, but also that my life and the world around me is better because I can read, because there is reading in it, because you can escape and you can fall in love, or you can really get behind a romance. I have found characters that are powerful or strong, or find their courage, or find their inner power or their inner strength. And I find that so empowering as a reader, and I could read that over and over again. I know love exists. I'm in love. But I really like seeing characters fall in love. It gives me such joy for the world that maybe this romance or this idea of love doesn't exist, but I know that people out there are in love and fall in love all the time. I can't handle all of the darkness that happens in the world in real life. I don't like all of the shit. I don't like all of the times that make me feel like the world is burning. I like books and stories that give me hope. And hope can come in a lot of ways, or, stories that make me feel good, warm and fuzzy. And so I think my reading has some extremes of this pure escapism, fantasy world building, but also people who can make me feel love and joy in real life. And so I've really come to view reading like I did when I was younger. Life is better with books in it. My life is better with books in it. And I have been reading until 4 a.m. And if you know me, you know I have a bedtime. You know I'm in bed by midnight. And I can say that reading has made me happier and more joyful as a person, more content as a person, because I'm spending less time online. I'm spending more time offline, but also in materials that I have selected for myself. Things that I feel like are perfect for me and are perfect for me, and you didn't have to buy them. What I guess I'm trying to get at is the things that are perfect for me are curated for me, that allow me to feel exactly the way I want to feel about myself and the world around me. That's the beauty of reading. I can read all female authors. I can read exclusively about female characters and empowerment and strength and women falling in love or things of that nature, and that's my reading life. And if I want to surround myself by those kinds of messages and images, people that make me feel happy to be me, or happy to be alive, or grateful for who I am and what I have and where I am, that's a reading life that is like tailored to me and exactly what I want. I'm just repeating myself here. So let's get into 5 books that I did not like so far this year. The first one is In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle, and this one I read at the top of the year. I think it was the first book I read, and it does have an interesting premise. It's about a woman who one day jumps into 5 years from where she is now, and she doesn't really like the life that she sees, but she does come back to her present timeline, and she's a little bit confused, is this my reality? Is this what's going to happen? Can I prevent it from happening? Is this really a timeline? Is this an alternate universe? It's not really like a sci-fi ebook. It's just one thing that happens and she goes back to reality. So I did like the premise, but about halfway through the book, there's a dark turn. I'm not going to say what it is, but there's something that happens, and as soon as it happens, I know exactly what's going to happen, and I really wish I DNF'd the book at that point. I really wish I put it down, because it just turns dark, and I really feel like that plot line absolutely did not need to happen to make this 5-year thing come true or not come true. Whatever lesson the character needed to learn could have happened without the dark plot point. I just felt like it was really unnecessary and turned what could have been a beautiful story into one that was dark. When I was reading this book, like the premise for the book, nowhere was this mentioned. And also, there was somebody I know who read it, and she did not mention this at all. This was a book that, had I known anything about the plot, I would have avoided, because it really did negatively affect my mood. I should not have read it to the end and regret reading it. The second book that I did not like, I think might be a toss-up out there because it's very popular, which is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And I really liked The Martian, so I felt like I would like Project Hail Mary. I do love sci-fi books. I do really like a saving the world kind of plot. I also really love space. I love space. And reading all about space. So this was, I felt like, a book that was absolutely meant for me. I'm just gonna let you know, I'm gonna be as vague as possible, but there's gonna be some kind of spoiler in here that if you want to go into the book with just like the description on the back, I think this would tell you a little bit more. So if you want to skip that, I'll give you a timestamp so you can hear more about my thoughts about the book that have nothing to do with the plot, really. In this book, there is sentient life. That's all I'm going to say. And that's what I'm saying, that if I, just by mentioning sentient life, although I'm not telling you what it is or who it is or what happens, just knowing that can change your particular view of the book, or spoil something. I did not like the depiction of the sentient life, or the fact that it existed so close to Earth, and scientists who are, as amazing as are depicted in the book somehow missed this. And they also don't explain in the book there could be life so close to Earth that we never saw. Like, I would have maybe been satisfied if somewhere along the line somebody was like, oh, there's some kind of shadow effect of this particular planet that makes that particular planet difficult to read. I'd have been like, okay, cool, thank you for letting me know. I felt the whole sentient life thing fairly unrealistic, and I can buy into a book. I can buy into magical realism, and I can buy into the sci-fi plots of we have to do this thing, or like everybody's gonna die. I can buy into it, but if there's something that can take me out of the reality, that was it. And then I have a hard time liking the book and then buying into it, really. So it took me out of it. I think what I dislike more is what this book represents. I almost exclusively read female authors, mostly because the world that we live in is designed for men. There's so much sexism and patriarchy all fucking around us, and I don't need to read more about all the amazing things that men are capable of doing. I would, 100 times out of 100, prefer to see a woman in that role. Reading this book really reminded me of that, but the second, layer to that is whenever we have these saving the world plots, both in, fiction, but also in movies, it's almost always white men writing about white men. And I find that so annoying. Really, there's no woman available. There's no people of color. There's no queer people or disabled people who could do these things. Really? There's nobody intelligent enough to do this thing, except for this one special white man. Really? I just don't think that there are enough women written into these kinds of plots. And I think that does have a lot to do with who writes these kinds of plots or writes these kinds of books. I do know that women do write these kinds of plots. I wanted to read this because it was one of those books of the year that was being raved about everywhere. So I'm like, yeah, I'll read it. It sounds like it's up my alley. In essence, if the book revolves around a white man, I don't really want to read it. So there's that. And I have since put some more books on my TBR that read somewhat similarly, that involve women of color, and people of color. That is just way more my speed. So thank you, Project Hail Mary, for teaching me about this. The third book that I did not like was Goodbye Things. And this book is a minimalist book, and I got into this huge, maybe 5 or 6 book reading train of these minimalist types of books. The first 2 were Marie Kondo's books. What I didn't like about this book is not so much the author's extreme take on minimalism. This is one thing that is mentioned in the book. And if you do have a problem with that, you are very much allowed to have that opinion. But what I didn't like about this book was that he wasn't, to me, it didn't seem like he was taking his own advice. He was saying that he was so happy and that minimalism like broke him free of, or like freed him. Minimalism was a freeing experience for him. Whereas the way that he talks about himself is like, I haven't really accomplished much in my life. That doesn't sound like somebody who's happy to me, and this is just my take. He also talks about how he wishes that he could entertain people in his home. That's kind of been a dream of his, but he just, goes out into the city instead. And I can see value in this approach, but if you have something that's a dream or something that would make you happy, to not do it for the sake of minimalism just sounds self-flagellating to me. It honestly made me sad to read about somebody who wants to do things but won't in the name of minimalism. People do really love this book, and I think I'm in the minority here, but I felt like he was giving advice he wasn't really taking for himself, so I just didn't like that. And this book showed me that this was kind of a standout in this particular realm of books. I have loved everything else that I have read before and after it in this vein, and also specifically Japanese authors as well. I've loved them. But this was one that really felt like it was the exception to the rule, if you will, which shows me that this is a kind of book that if I were to pick up something blindly in this field written by a Japanese author, I might really like it. And I'm really glad that I learned that. The last books, I'm calling them, they're books 4, 5, and 6. So Delphine Jones Takes a Chance and The Midnight Bargain, all of these were so slow and honestly kind of boring. If you can't make something happen in the first 50 pages for me, I'm not interested. I took almost 100 pages with The Midnight Bargain. That one's a fantasy book and kind of like a feminist take on the fantasy book. And the author of The Midnight Bargain is Canadian as well, so I really wanted to read it. But it was kind of like this Victorian era feminist take with like witches. I was so into it, but it has a lot of it was just nothing was happening, and there was always the promise of something. Same thing with Delphine Jones. Like, that book was about, a woman who's on the come up. Like, she loses her job and bad things happen, and then she comes up. I mean, I didn't finish it. I DNF'd all 3 of these books. But this one in particular really hammered home that she had a child at a really young age. And I'm like, okay, great. I know this about her, but can something happen? Like, can the story just move? And so there was always promise of more stories in these books that never really materialized. Okay, books I loved. I'm gonna go in no particular order. I'm gonna talk about actually Convenience Store Woman. I love this book. This is a very short book, and you can read it in a couple of hours. Like, even the slowest readers could read it in a day. I think it's around 100 pages, maybe 120, something of that nature. So you really could finish it in a couple of hours. This was a top, it's a contender for the top favorites of the year so far. I mean, the size really did help me. It was one of the books that helped me out of my reading slump. But what I really liked about this, or what surprised me the most about this, is that this is kind of a slice of life story. It's about a woman who works at a convenience store and has been for roughly 20-ish years. And so she's nearing 40, and people are very critical of her because she is in a job that most people consider dead end. She is not married. She has no marriage prospects. She doesn't make a lot of money. And so her family and other people at the convenience store are very critical of her choices, but she is quite happy in them. And so what I liked most about this book is how much it made me think about, or is questioning whether is she a rebel for deferring people's expectations, or is she really a cog in this system, in this like capitalist machine that could not give a shit about a woman who makes this convenience store her life? And I really like that dichotomy and thinking through it. And this book did surprise me because it's very character oriented opposed to plot driven, because not a lot happens. Philosophical questions, if you will, were so interesting. And this really felt like a break in the norm that I thought that I'd really like it. A read-alike that was mentioned to me for this was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, which I did love in 2019. It was one of my favorite books of the year. However, I did read that book after Convenience Store Woman, and I did not like it. I DNF'd it. which is a very interesting experience to have. The next book is Confessions of a Shopaholic. This book was very lighthearted and very kind of fun and whimsical, and I think if for all of y'all who are in the low buy no buy space, I think there's at least something you could take away from this book. It's also British. I love British books. I really like British humor. So this woman gets into credit card debt and she has to cut back on her expenses, or she has to shop less. And this book is kind of a funny take on what many of us might call like a shopping ban or a no buy, really. And she really does struggle with it, tries to talk herself out of buying things, and then gives all of these outrageous ideas to buy stuff. I really did like that book, and it was just a funny take on this no buy experience. I mean, Sophie Kinsella was not trying to do an expose on shopping addiction, so she's not writing about this from a no buy perspective or a saving money perspective. So if you haven't read it, I would just say that. Also, it's very different from the movie. The movie is Americanized, opposed to it taking place in Britain. So just a really fun, great read. I did not like the sequel though. I hated the sequel. There's actually like it's a series, so she has more than 2 books. It might be like 3, 4, or 5. I don't know. There's quite a few. I did not like the sequel because I really think it trivializes shopping addiction and also makes the main character, I think it just makes the main character feel really superficial. I also think it pokes fun at the very real problems of shopping addiction. It also like takes the worst parts of her and just like puts them on steroids and shows no character development at all. And I'm like, really? After you had that year of learning about shopping and not spending, and also learning about paying down debt and trying to do it, she learned nothing. Anyways, I did not like the sequel. My favorite book, I'm just gonna go into my favorite book now. My favorite book of the year so far, Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. It's a trilogy, and I have the other books to read. The reason why you're not seeing any books on the screen is because all of these were read on my e-reader. So I don't actually have any physical books to share with you, at least so far. I like the plot. The plot is very simple, and the world building is actually very simple here as well. There's not a lot of, at least so far in the first book, it's not a very complicated magic system, although I'm not sure I would call it magic system, but magic system. Okay, so what you need to know is that there's 3 kind of main kingdoms, and you're in an era of horse-drawn carriages, swords, things like that. So these 3 kingdoms, and there's this thing called the Fold, which is this dark expanse that splits one of the kingdoms in half, essentially. And there's creatures in there that eat people. So if you travel through the expanse to get to the other side, which you would need to do for shipping and things of that nature, like, you are very likely to be killed by the creatures that live in there. I thought it would be creepy, but it's not. You know, like the horror kind of movie creepy, it's not like that. The main character, this happens in literally the first or second chapter, so I'm not spoiling anything. There are magical people, maybe not magical, there are people who have natural abilities, people who can summon fire, move the waves, things like that. I mean, these natural magical abilities, and the main female character is found to have one that is very relevant to the particular problems of this world. So love that, and I love that she's a fierce woman. What I like most about this, it's gonna give away something. So, and it's gonna give away something that you wouldn't be able to read in like a back flap. So move forward at your own risk. So the twist, it's not the fact that like, oh, you don't see the twist coming, or like it's a twist for a twist's sake. And what this book does so brilliantly is demonstrate the ginormous power imbalance between this female character and the secondary character. There's a huge power imbalance, and this person really tries to manipulate her and is very good at it because she doesn't see this person's shitty motives. And this person, in essence, wants to, this is like next level spoiler alert. So again, go for it at your own risk. So this character, in essence, wants to use her powers for their own reasons and wants to own them, which means owning her. This person is so willing to manipulate her, they are willing to have sex with her, to convince her that this person is a good person or cares about her. Just think about that for a second. A person who has very shitty motives, willing to sleep with somebody to convince them that they are a good person who cares about them. And it's this act of manipulation that I think is some of the most powerful and central parts of this book that makes it so strong and so compelling. And if you read this book, I encourage you to think about this relationship dynamic and how it happens and takes place in real life, how there are real power imbalances between men and women, but also between older men and younger women, especially older men who are pursuing younger women, even in legal ways, but still pursuing younger women. I do just want to say that while there is no SA in this book, the power dynamics and the manipulation feels a little of that nature, and I think could be triggering to some people. So let me just put that out there. And so I think that there's a lot of real world examples that we could think of that maybe might illuminate power imbalances that we see in our lives. And that whole power imbalance is chef's kiss. It's amazing. It makes me so uncomfortable to read about it, which is like in a good way. Okay, the last two books are part of a series, but they're standalones. So the first one is The Little Cafe in Copenhagen. The second one is The Little Tea Shop in Tokyo. It's by the same author. I loved these books. These books were very light. They're both around 300 pages. They involve travel and there's like sizzling romances in them. I love it. Okay, I just want to say, no judgment here of me or you, but in these books, like when it comes to romances, there's Hallmark romances where like they kiss and that's it. There's some real on sex in here. So like, not a lot, but like there are descriptions of sex. So just so you know going in if that's something you want to read or not. I personally think the Tea Shop in Tokyo one is a little bit more compelling. The character there, I do believe, is a few years younger than the one in the first one. The Tokyo book is one of the later books in the series, but that doesn't really matter. She is 28, the one in Tokyo, and the first one I think is in her early 30s. I found the Tokyo book much more compelling for a couple of reasons. One, I feel like I resonated with the character a little bit more. She's exactly my age. She is a little bit unsure of herself. And then I also like the plot line of meeting somebody who maybe has hurt you or has the potential to hurt you, like not physically, but like emotionally. And I feel like a lot of women have dealt with that in their lives. I also love the scenery of Tokyo. I think it's really beautiful. I like the play between the characters. It's almost like they're not enemies, but almost like an enemies to lovers kind of thing. The first book, The Cafe in Copenhagen, I didn't like that one as much because in the book there is a tour of some kind that is mentioned, or that does take up a whole lot of the book. So there could be like 50 pages and the love interests have just like set high, and I'm like, excuse me, I don't care about the tour. I want to know what happens to these characters. When is the confession about your childhood or something? When is that going to come? Or when is the confession about the person who hurt you? You know, like in those tender moments where they reveal a secret about themselves. When is that happening? I don't care if they had like a really delicious donut. Okay, so those are some of my favorite books that I'm interested in reading for spring. The very next book up is Queenie. This has been on my TBR since 2019, and I really feel like I'm gonna like it. It is based in Britain. It's like a Jamaican British woman, and she's trying to find herself, and she's like making questionable decisions with men. So I feel like it has that romance aspect. It also has the British aspect that I like, and the finding yourself element that I like. I think that's gonna be a great choice. His Only Wife also is next up on the list, but Queenie is top choice. Like, she's being read next. I'm also planning on finishing the series, the Leigh Bardugo series I was just telling you about with the Shadow and Bone. There's two more, and I purposely have not read them yet, and I didn't just go right into it because I wanted time to think about the first one, break it down. What do I think? What's bothering me? What do I like? How can I learn from this? And also, if I just went to the second book, I would be the second one and the third one. Like I would be reading till 4 or 5 a.m. every night until I finished it. And I cannot have that kind of energy in my life. Like I can't be staying up till 4 a.m. So we needed a little bit of a break. I'm obsessed with that book, so we needed a break. Six of Crows is also on the list. I don't know if I'll get to that in May, but I mean, this is a spring reading list, so I think I'll get to that in June, if not May. Gifts of Imperfection, I want to read. I'm almost done with Rising Strong by Brené Brown, so we're going to go to Gifts of Imperfection. I'm also presently buddy reading Atomic Habits with my friend, and I think we're both really liking it, and it was an inspiration to Low Buy Bingo. Also, I've been on TikTok. I got TikTok for the first time in April, and TikTok really likes Colleen Hoover. I think that's her name. Coho, as they call it. So Verity was a one that I think I would like. I'm on waiting list for that. We'll see if I get it. And lastly, Sarah J. Maas. She has 2 series. One that's like A Court of Something, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm on a wait list for that. So I don't think we'll get to that in May. It's too long. We'll see when. But she also has a second one, a second series. I don't know which one came first, but I have access to that other series. Editing channel will have the name on the screen. So there we are. Those are the books I'm interested in reading for the next couple of months. I'm just looking at my holds list here. That's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed talking about books today. Let me know what you're reading in the comments down below. Love to hear your thoughts on what you're reading. Thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you again around here soon.